I think without the great controversy perspective that I have now, I completely understand how easy it might be to misunderstand or misconstrue what goes on in the book of Job. So in fact, I found a very interesting commentary. It was titled, "Is the Book of Job a Parody?" And the title intrigued me, so listen to what this author says. "Sometimes I really do not like certain chapters of the Bible. Two of the worst chapters for me have always been Job 1 and 2. They tell the story of a good and righteous man who became the pawn in a little game of Russian roulette between God and Satan. Job is the unwitting butt of a cosmic wager. While I do not believe that good and righteous people who love God will always have a life that turns out peachy keen, I nevertheless have a big problem with a God who uses humans the way God uses Job in these two chapters. This is divine entrapment. What would you think of a parent who conspired with a drug dealer to try to sell drugs to their children and threatened them with killing their parents or their siblings just to see if the child will say no to drugs? What kind of a sick parent does that? What would you think of a husband who conspired with a friend to try to seduce his wife just to see if she really loves him? What kind of a husband would do this? Yet this is what God and Satan conspire to do with Job. I'm sorry, I really do not like these chapters of the Bible." He concludes that if one reads the prologue of Job without awareness of the author's intent to argue against a perennial but perverse notion of God, the picture that emerges is precisely the one the author attempted to disprove. In other words, Job 1 and 2 is actually a parody of the recurrent, persistent, false view of God. It shows a forgetful God, a power-hungry God, a God who is so desirous of proving himself right that he plays around with human lives, which mean nothing to him just to make a point. The author of the book of Job is making fun of this popular and pervasive but perverted view of God in order to show us that our God, the God of the Bible, is not like this at all. Thoughts about that?
Well, God only usually gives you what you can handle, and most people probably couldn't handle what he went through, so he's probably above most people's, he tolerated more than most people can handle.
And it's interesting, God knew what he could tolerate.
Well, also, God knows the end from the beginning.
Right.
So he knew what Job was going to do.
Yes.
And Satan is a great accuser. I'm sure Satan did not leave it alone until God had to step back and show Satan that there is somebody who truly loves him.
Right.
I think it was about what that author thought it was about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what was leading up to that. And so what insight does our great controversy perspective give us into evaluating Job's backstory? I found a quote from the Book of Education, gives us some insight. "Unselfishness, the very principle of God's kingdom, is the principle that Satan hates. Its very existence he denies. From the beginning of the great controversy, he has endeavored to prove God's principles of action to be selfish, and he deals in the same way with all who serve God. To disprove Satan's claim is the work of Christ and all who bear his name." That's us. "It was to give in his own life an illustration of unselfishness that Jesus came in the form of humanity. And all who accept this principle are to be workers together with him in demonstrating it in practical life. To choose the right because it is right, to stand for truth at the cost of suffering and sacrifice. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord." She's quoting Isaiah there. Very early in the history of the world is given the life record of one over whom this controversy of Satan's was waged. So Job's life is the record of Satan's controversy, of Satan's accusations against God. Of Job, the patriarch of Uz, the testimony of the searcher of hearts was, "There is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, fears God, eschews evil. Against this man, Satan brought scornful charge. Does Job fear God for nothing? Hast thou not made a hedge about him, about his house, about all that he has on every side? Put forth your hand now, touch all that he has, touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. The Lord said unto Satan, all that he has is in your power. Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Thus permitted, Satan swept away all that Job possessed, flocks and herds, men servants and maidservants, sons and daughters, and he smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his feet to the crown of his head. Still another element of bitterness was added to Job's cup. His friends, seeing in adversity but the retribution of sin, God's retributive justice, pressed on his bruised and burdened spirit their accusations of wrongdoing, seemingly forsaken of heaven and earth, yet holding fast his faith in God and his consciousness of integrity. In anguish and perplexity he cried, my soul is weary of my life. According to his faith, so it was unto Job. When he hath tried me, he said, I shall come forth as gold. And so it happened. By his patient endurance, he vindicated his own character, and thus the character of him whose representative he was. And the Lord turned the captivity of Job. Also the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than the beginning. For those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose, the Bible biography has a yet higher lesson in the ministry of sorrow. You are my witnesses, says the Lord, that I am God, witnesses that he is good and that his goodness is supreme. We are made a theater unto the world, both to angels and to men. Have you ever thought when going through a trial that there was a higher lesson in your ministry of sorrow?